Welcome to this FAME Leadership Screencast, part of the Need to Know series. This screencast will focus on how leaders can support and sustain FAME implementation during year one and beyond. During this screencast, we will review 2 theory of change models, provide examples and ideas from Cohort 1 leaders, highlight 4 leadership essentials, and identify resources that provide additional guidance about the change process. Innovations such as FAME create change at both individual and organizational levels. As teachers challenge their knowledge and beliefs, try on new practices, and build competencies, their individual concerns shift and evolve. At the same time, there are predictable system-wide issues that need to be addressed at the school level. This screencast provides an overview of models that describe both individual and system-level change processes and offers guidance around how a school leader can best forecast and respond to these issues throughout the implementation process. First, we'll explore a personal change model called the concerns-based adoption model. Let's start by thinking about a time when you were involved with an implementation effort. This could be as either a leader or a participant. See if you can bring to mind someone who embodied this initiative from the start. Now imagine a few words that would describe that person. We often characterize these individuals who are involved in embracing initiatives from early on as innovative, risk takers, perhaps supportive, or sometimes we even refer to them as good team players. Were these consistent with words you came up with? Now, think of someone who had more trouble getting started or getting on board with this initiative. How would you describe that person? Often, we think of these individuals as resistant to change, disengaged, oppositional, or undermining. But let's consider, could person 1 and person 2 be the same person? What could influence the same person to respond to an initiative in such different ways? The concerns-based adoption model research helps us understand the human side of any change initiative. The model is based on a foundational principle that people considering and experiencing change evolve in the types of concerns they express and in the ways they use an innovation. At the start of an innovation, individuals may appear unconcerned with an initiative because they are not aware or simply have other things on their mind. But as they gain awareness, their first questions are typically self-oriented. What is this initiative about? What do I need to do? Will I even be able to do this? It's only when these informational and personal questions are resolved that the more task-oriented questions will emerge. These include, how do I do this? Will I have enough time to make this work in my classroom? And how will I use these new materials? Let's listen to Danielle, a FAME Cohort 1 teacher from Benjamin Stoddard Middle School, describe a concern that you might hear in your school as teachers begin work on the FAME initiative. Can you identify the stage of concern that's reflected in Danielle's comments?
Well, it can be very scary to relinquish, control of your classroom to your students. I know that when I first started, with the whole formative assessment thing, that was one of my biggest fears is you're telling me that you want me to give my students the power.
Danielle shared personal concerns about giving some of the control of her classroom over to her students. She continued to explore formative assessment practices in her classroom and with her community of practice, a critical implementation support. Let's listen further to find out how she was able to move beyond these personal concerns.
And what I love the most, and this actually happened today, is we were finishing an activity, and at the end of the class, I'm doing my wrap up and everything. One of the young ladies raised her hand, was like, Miss Carpenter, we kind of talked when we were doing that group activity. We don't feel that we've actually accomplished this success criteria. Can we work on it again next week? So, it's one of those things where they've really bought into it and they've really taken it as their own. And obviously something like that is going to completely shift the way I teach, because if they're asking me to reteach something, I'm not going to tell them no. So I'm looking to them to kind of guide my instruction now rather than them looking to me.
As Danielle illustrates, when self and task-oriented concerns are largely resolved, the individual can move on with implementation and shift focus to impact. At this stage, educators often ask, how is this change working for students? How can we learn more from each other about how to do this work well? Or are there ways we might modify or refocus our approach so that we can improve our own practice? We can see that Danielle was beginning to move in this direction when, by the end of year one, she was thinking about how formative assessment was creating impact in her classroom by shifting the responsibility for learning to her students. In addition to attending to the individual concerns of faculty, leaders benefit from simultaneously addressing system-wide implementation needs. For this, we'll look at the research done at the National Implementation Research Network, an organization that has looked closely at what makes for sustainable implementation across a system. The network model describes predictable changes that are required to sustain practice across an entire system. In other words, to get to the point where the change effort is fully installed and becomes part of the way things are done in that organization. The network model of change encompasses 4 stages of systems-level change. During the exploration stage, an implementation team assesses whether there is a good match between the school's needs and the FAME program. There are a number of important issues to resolve at this stage, including developing an understanding of the new initiative, identifying why it's important, and what it might mean for your school. Let's listen briefly to some elements of the exploration stage that took place at a FAME Cohort 1 school.
Okay, one of our first initial meetings with all of the department chairs and our administrative staff, and we had central office included as well, we invited Melissa Finkel from MSDE to come in and speak with them to introduce FAME to them. She showed some of the wonderful videos from FAME, and we got to let them ask questions and speak about it. We showed them some of the ideas like the sticky note lesson, which really got them engaged. They could see immediately how they could incorporate these types of things into their classroom. And so that really hooked them and brought them on board.
The result of a successful exploration stage is a clear implementation plan with tasks and timelines to facilitate the launch of the program. In the next phase, the installation stage, members of the implementation team help secure the needed resources to do the work ahead and prepare staff for experimenting with new practices. During this time, they're grappling with bringing on new instructional practices and sharing those with teachers across the school. In Stage 3, initial implementation, leaders need to look across the school and ensure fidelity to key formative assessment principles as teachers take on these new practices. This looking out across establishes common understanding about what formative assessment will look like in practice across the school. Also in this stage, leaders are thinking about increasing engagement by ensuring that new teachers are encouraged to join in this work. In the final full implementation stage, more than half of the staff is using formative assessment practices with fidelity and good outcomes for students. Let's hear how central office and school leaders are thinking about sustaining FAME implementation at Lockerman Middle School. Listen as they talk about their current work in Stage 3, initial implementation, and their thinking about moving into Stage 4, full implementation.
I do understand that research does say it does take a good 3 to 4 years to make a change. And I think with the implementation of FAME that we're not going to see any difference to that. I think that it will take us 3 to 4 years to see that change over time. I think short-term wise, you're looking at a cohort right now here and expanding that cohort next year. And then this is a pretty large school, so then by year 3, whole school. Outside of Lockerman, I see grabbing an elementary school, maybe a high school, and again, looking at a cohort model where you can gain, I think it's important to give the teachers a choice to participate. I think when, that means they have a willingness to start the change process anyway. And then, as I said, once you see successes, then it starts to get contagious. And so those that may have been a naysayer in the beginning, Then by year 2, they might be jumping on board, or year 3. So I do see that it does take 3 to 4 years to make a change.
I think the role that the principal has with sustaining the program is to continue to make sure that people understand, the teachers understand that just because we get through the modules at the end of the year, we're not experts. We will still need to determine where we're at. We're going to need our own continuum of learning, and that may be a project that we set up at the end of the year is, here's where we're at now. Where do we need to go? And what steps do we need to make sure we take to get there? So maybe what we're implementing with students, we need to take a time at the end of the year and set it up for ourselves. What better application of what it is that we want children to do than to use it ourselves?
As these leaders suggest, moving through the 4 stages of system-level change, as described by the National Implementation Research Network, takes many years. As you heard in these videos, during these implementation cycle, there needs to be ongoing attention to what's been learned and analysis of progress towards long-term goals. Keep these ideas in mind as we share the 4 leadership essentials that summarize the information from this screencast. Leadership essential number 1. Ensure your leadership team has a shared theory of action about change. Leadership teams that have common understandings about both the change process and effective strategies aligned to that common knowledge tend to be able to more quickly and effectively respond to typical implementation challenges. Spend time together clarifying your understandings and beliefs about these concepts. Leadership essential number 2. Plan and manage the change process. Expect that different people will be in different places in the adoption process and plan accordingly. The leadership team's job is to monitor where teachers are in the change process and plan interventions that support them where they are. This might mean repeating interventions over time, clarifying how to bring new people on board, or differentiating support. Leadership essential number 3. Use stage theories to improve your powers of prediction. Leaders' abilities to predict and forecast change are proven to support implementation at both the individual and system levels. The fact that there are predictable levels of change can be used to your advantage. Leadership essential number 4. Keep the long view present as short-term needs are addressed. Full implementation and widespread use of formative assessment take several years. The research and our own experiences confirm this, but our practices don't often align with this knowledge. Give your school ample time to learn, apply, reflect, align, and refine this work, and keep that going until formative assessment becomes the way of teaching and learning in your school. Let's go over these 4 essentials together. Develop a shared theory of action amongst leaders at your site. Keep in mind that successful change is planned and managed. Use stage theories to improve your powers of prediction. And count on the fact that full implementation of formative assessment will take several years, and your job will be to keep that long view present as short-term needs are addressed. As we close, we'll share 3 resources that are located on the MSDE online learning platform for use with your leadership team. First, a 1-page snapshot of the different stages in the concerns-based adoption model that will help you know how to best respond to teachers' varied concerns about implementation. Second, a concise overview of the network's stages of implementation to assist you in gauging progress and anticipating your school's next implementation steps, with a link to the National Implementation Research Network website, which has fantastic free resources for leadership teams to delve into this work. And third, a stage-by-stage description of each stage of the network implementation written specifically to capture the stages of how teachers adopt formative assessment in the FAME model. Thank you for joining us on this screencast about supporting and sustaining FAME implementation at your school. We hope you'll join us for other screencasts in this Need to Know Leadership series.